Blessings to all of you. Love and compassion to all sentient beings. Blessings to Pachamama, Madre Tierra, Curandera. I honor you, Aho. It is June, and like clockwork, the United States of America, in the twilight of its young 250 years on Earth, has, like Mars in retrograde, orbited itself back into a feverish, turbulent, and violent episode of summer 2025 edition. President Donald Trump, as many of you know, has deployed 700 Marines and 4,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles to rid the city of undocumented workers, including garment district workers, construction workers, cooks, folks hanging outside of Home Depot, the criminal type. This has naturally sparked dozens of protests around LA, which I want to remind you stands for Los Angeles, a Spanish name, and now in other cities. And there's a big protest planned for this Saturday coming up in Los Angeles as well. And I just want to name that I find what the president is doing to be reprehensible. It seems to me to be a clear political ploy to throw his weight around and demonstrate to the liberal state of California that he has all the power in the world and can use it at a whim. There's a reason why he's sending troops maybe to California and going after undocumented workers in California and not, say, the Midwest. For more context, according to the New York Times, undocumented immigrants are concentrated in a few American industries, making up 19% of landscaping workers, 17% of farm workers, and 13% of construction workers. And to be clear, Donald Trump's own businesses have employed workers without papers. During more than 5 years as a housekeeper, for example, at the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey, Victorina Morales made Donald Trump's bed, cleaned his toilet, and dusted his crystal golf trophies. And of course, as many have pointed out, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we halted efforts to go after undocumented workers. Why? Because these were the people who were processing our food, making our food, delivering our food, so we could all live in the comfort of our Zoom existence. And I will just add that these people are still processing our food, making our food, and delivering our food. To add a cherry on top, in 2017, Trump himself commuted an Iowa meatpacking plant executive convicted in the Obama era after a jury found that he knowingly hired hundreds of undocumented workers and paid for their forged documents. Now, all of this aside, I'm actually not here to talk to you about immigration policy or about how to treat each other, citizens and non-citizens alike. I will talk about that, of course, because I always do, about how to treat the stranger, how to be a good host. I'm here to talk to you about protest, and I'm here to talk to you about violence, because I keep seeing in my feeds these interesting conversations about violent protests and nonviolent protests. Obviously, folks are wanting to protest the actions of the federal government and their provocation, and there is a great deal of buzzing conversation online about how to show up in a protest, violently or non-violently. And I want to offer you a meditation to consider. A protest is a ceremony. It is a sacred field that you enter. When you enter into a protest, you are crossing a threshold into a sacred, ritualized space in which a human community telegraphs to another human community that its actions, that the way it is showing up, that the way it is presencing itself is out of alignment, is out of balance, and is out of sync with the way we ought to treat each other. It is extremely important that we get clear on this. And there are lineages, perhaps most prominently the civil rights movement lineage, that teaches us this fact that protest is sacred ceremony. It is a mirror that we use to telegraph to those in the human community who have forgotten how to be present, who have forgotten how precious and fleeting life is, and who have forgotten how to treat their fellow kin, regardless of citizenship status, to remember. So protest is sacred ceremony that is invoked to move members of our human community to remember, and it is the way we enact remembering. And at this hour, the human community of Americans, Latino and otherwise, and of the family and friends of undocumented workers in this country, enter into ceremony and telegraph a message to the human community of federal guard troops, of Marines, of police officers, who are also our brothers and sisters, whose masks and badges must not ever make us forget that they are also part of the human family, and who we must remind what it is we're all doing here on Earth. Protest is sacred ceremony. Again, it is a container. It is a force field for all who enter it to remember their humanity. Human, meaning living soil, born from Pachamama's bosom, born out of the dust of the earth you are, and you will return also. I will return. We all will return to the dust. We enter into protest to remember this fundamental truth, which means that how we care for each other and how we show up for each other is precisely how we treat the person whose actions we're protesting, which is to say, with kindness. And I want you to hear the etymological root of that word. It is related to kin or kinship. We enter into the sacred ceremony of protest to remember our basic kinship. Now, I will speak about violence. The author Thomas More wrote that the word violence comes from the Latin word vis, meaning life force. Its very roots suggest that in violence, the thrust of life is making itself visible. He wrote that if that fundamental vitality is not present in the heart, it appears distorted by our repressions and compromises, our fears and our narcissistic manipulations. Joshua Michael Schrey, in an episode of the Emerald podcast entitled War and Ritual Ecstasy, points out that pre-industrial societies held thresholds and ceremonies and rituals for entering into war, and then hosted ceremonies and rituals for exiting war states and entering back into community. This is not to romanticize bloody pre-industrial societies or villainize modern society, but to observe that when human communities, and especially men, since it is usually men who go to war, ritualize and ceremonialize the predator-prey cycle of which we are all a part. And let me just pause here to say something about this predator-prey cycle, because some of us are confused by the messages that we get from modernity, and we seem to be confused into thinking we're not a part of this cycle. As human beings, as living soil, we feed and we are feed. This is what it means to be an animal, and we are animals. We are vertebrate mammals, and we carry the lineage of many more animals in our bones and in our hearts and in our lungs and in our spleens. Joshua says the following: everything that lives is both food and the eater of food. The mother devours other life that will construct the embryo that will become the being. The being devours other lives to stay alive, and then is ultimately devoured itself by nature. This life, the very cycle of nature itself, is one birth, death, devouring. As beings in this cycle, we are biologically constructed around this core experience, an experience of being at the mercy of the source of nourishment and the slayer of the source of nourishment simultaneously. In other words, the predator-prey cycle is innate in our bones. We are both predator and prey, but we are cut off from this truth in our hypermodernized societies, and being cut off, being repressed, being out of touch with the vital life force of our being means that periodically, sporadically, and inevitably, bouts of violence extreme bouts of violence will spring out, just as they are springing out right now from the federal government. Knowing this, protest organizers should help the people who join work through their frustrations and their angst and their hatred and their anger and, yes, their violence. Protest movements are not simply here to help us remember how we ought to treat each other. They are also here as ritualized containers to help us move through disquieting tendencies, reflexes, and bodily impulses, which are all part of what it means to be living soil and to carry the relic and ancestry of our animal bodies and all of the animal bodies that have come before us and which are still present in us. The sacred ceremonial act of protest should include not just going out to protest, but staying in to dance, to move, to yell, to hold, and to alchemize the vis, the fire, the spirit, and the life force, which in modernity has been shackled and incarcerated, and which we are all of us, the protester, the Marine, the National Guardsman, the President, the undocumented worker, the influencer cosplaying as an anarchist, the terrified family members, all of us are informed by this. Modernity has terraformed all of us, including the National Guardsman, whose perhaps only vessel for human warmth and belonging and connection is the National Guard, who had his hair shaved as a recruit and was made to run and shit and eat and sleep with his fellow recruits, and who was broken down to dust and then transformed into a member of one tribe and who now moves as one. What makes you think you will be able to successfully meet the potency of that life force with your own life force as a protest movement unless you are willing to transform yourselves into sacred ceremony in the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you breathe life, and the way ultimately that you love, the way that you treat self and other, no matter who self or other is, as kin. This is a meditation. I offer you no guarantees, not even the insistence that my take is correct. Hold the question and learn, which is a very difficult, astoundingly difficult in the incarcerated state of modernity. Learn to hold and stoke and cultivate your fire. Peace.